Hi everyone, it's Reilly with another all-English episode. Happy Thanksgiving everyone, or at least it will be Thanksgiving soon. I think it's technically next Thursday, but my friends and I are going to celebrate it this weekend. We're going to have a little, we call it Friendsgiving, get-together tomorrow where my friend is going to host and cook something. The classic Thanksgiving food is turkey. That's a little bit hard to find in Japan, so I'm not sure if he's going to have a turkey or if he'll just do a chicken or, I don't know, a ham or some other big meat thing. And then, of course, there'll be like mashed potatoes and some of the other Thanksgiving classics, but just maybe not a turkey. But the important thing is it's just friends getting together to hang out and, I don't know, maybe talk about what we're thankful for. Maybe not, depends on I don't know what direction the conversation goes, I guess. But I'm not actually going to talk about Thanksgiving too much in this episode. What I want to talk about is anime, Japanese animation, right? But first, the Instagram. So mine is Reilly Sullivan XD, and Sota is Eigo no Sota. We have the events coming up. Osaka is next week, next Sunday, and then, so that's the 30th of November, and then Tokyo is going to be December 13th, that one's on a Saturday. If you don't have tickets yet, I think there are still some tickets left. You can get them on Sota's Instagram, Eigo no Sota. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone there. But yeah, with all that said and done, let's get into the episode. Okay, so anime, yeah. Obviously anime is a big thing for people who come to Japan. Like a lot of my friends who come to Japan to teach English, they tend to be pretty into anime. I'm not that into anime. Something, especially nowadays, like since coming to Japan, I haven't really watched much at all. I've watched a few, anime films, which I guess still count, but, stuff like Ghibli stuff and, a few movies like that. I've probably mentioned in previous episodes that I like Sono Shion, or Shion Sono as I call him in the English way, I guess. Stuff like Paprika and Perfect Blue and that kind of thing I like. So I've watched those since coming to Japan, but I haven't watched an anime series, I think, basically at all since coming here. But I did as a kid, so that's how I want to start this episode, is talking about kind of my first introduction or first exposure to Japanese animation, to anime. And it was probably from like Saturday morning cartoons. Waking up in the morning, going downstairs and turning on the TV, it would be cartoons. And of course, a lot of them would be, American or Western, stuff like Scooby-Doo or Dexter's Lab. I don't know if maybe you guys would know Scooby-Doo, but stuff like that is what I would watch as a kid. But then there were also a few Japanese cartoons, I guess you can call it. There were a few animes in there. I think some of the earliest ones I remember were probably like Pokemon and Digimon. Pokemon, of course, is still really, really popular with kids. And I watched it. I don't know if it would have been like the first time it came out in America or if they were doing reruns. I probably would have started watching it in, I don't know, 1999 or 2000. I would have been like 5 or 6 years old probably is when I started watching. But from the beginning, from very young, I was really into Pokemon. I remember, I had the cards really young. I watched the TV show, the movie that came out a little bit later, and then eventually I got the game, the Game Boy game, Blue. I got Pokemon Blue when I was, I don't remember how old I was, probably like first or second grade maybe. But yeah, there were a bunch of shows in this kind of era, this Saturday morning cartoon era that I would watch, like stuff like Yeah, Gundam was on. I think it was Gundam Wing at that time was the English title. Some of these, I think the Japanese title is the same. If not, and you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry. I don't know the Japanese title for a lot of them. Okay, but also another kind of like, yeah, the Digimon and Pokemon, another one that was kind of a card game or something where like they collect monsters, but in a kind of a girly way, was a show called Card Captor Sakura. Where, yeah, it was like a girl that would get kind of cards that had like these monsters, or not monsters, maybe in her case they were like kind of fairy things. Anyway, whatever, that was one of the shows. And then of course Dragon Ball Z. I think my first memory of watching that series, with Goku and stuff. We call him Goku in English. I'd never heard Son Goku until coming to Japan. We just call him Goku. But yeah, that series, I think I started watching at Dragon Ball Z. And then I didn't know until later that there was like the original Dragon Ball series. And I don't think I ever watched that like on TV, just on like on the internet, Sorry about that. Then later there was this other block of shows that wasn't in the morning, but it was like after school or maybe even like after dinner time, called Toonami. And that one had a lot of anime. I think that one was like especially for showing anime. So that one had some other classics like Sailor Moon. I think Dragon Ball Z was also on there. Gundam, Hamtaro or Hamtaro as we called him, and Zoids. A lot of these, like Zoids, were pretty popular in America when I was a kid. I don't know if Zoids is or was popular in Japan. It was, they had these like giant robot animals. It was kind of like Gundam, I guess, but the robots were shaped like animals, like a tiger or an elephant or something like that. And yeah, what was the main guy's Zoid? His robot was called like Liger Zero or something like that. I could be getting that wrong. But I also had the Game Boy Advanced game for Zoids. It was like an RPG where you collect different Zoids and you can like upgrade them, and yeah, that I really liked that game as a kid. And what other animes were back then? Yu Yu Hakusho, Rurouni Kenshin were big. I really liked Rurouni Kenshin a lot I don't know what grade I would have been in then, maybe 5th grade or something like that, 4th, 5th grade. And then the other kind of like, so I mentioned Pokemon and Pokemon cards. Of course, those were huge in elementary school. And then there were the other kind of like anime toys, right? There was Yu-Gi-Oh cards were really, really big. I think after Yu-Gi-Oh came out, the school banned Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards, so we couldn't bring them to school anymore because they were becoming like a problem. I don't know, kids were fighting over them or crying because of the games or something like that, and they made it so that we weren't allowed to bring them to school anymore. And the other like anime toy was Beyblades. I think those are still popular in Japan. The like little tops where you like spin them and they battle. Those were pretty cool. I had a few of those. But I was never one of those kids that like had all the new toys and stuff. I was always jealous of those kids, of course. I would always get like 1 or 2 for Christmas, and then my parents kind of didn't understand that you were supposed to collect them all. I would ask for more Beyblades, and my mom would say, well, but you already have 2 or 3 Beyblades. That's enough to play with your friends, right? But then other people would get, the newest Beyblade every time and stuff like that. Yeah, and then some of the anime from like elementary school that I didn't get into, but were really popular, were like Naruto and One Piece were really big. I think it was elementary school. This might be more like junior high school now. Like I said, I never really watched those for whatever reason, but I just was never really the biggest fan of those shows. I never really watched them. And then, yeah, in junior high school to high school, I kind of stopped watching anime. I mean, I kind of stopped watching cartoons in general. And for me, as a kid, like, anime was just like another cartoon, right? I watched all the other kind of American cartoons and I watched the anime. And I didn't make like a huge distinction between the two. I didn't really think of like Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon as Japanese. I just thought of it as like a cool TV show that I liked. But then when I got to junior high school, I kind of stopped watching cartoons altogether, so I didn't really watch any anime. Until I got to college. Probably it was once I got into university, people started talking about anime again. People that I thought were cool. And this is kind of a big difference where, like, you know, I stopped watching cartoons definitely in high school, but there were a few kids in high school that did watch anime and really liked anime, but they weren't cool, you know, like they were geeks or, you know, otaku, right? We would call them like anime geeks or anime nerds or something like that. Or the other term we have is weebs, which stands for weeaboos, which means people who really like anime. I don't really know where the word weeaboo comes from, but it was kind of a term used for people who like Japanese stuff, especially anime. But in college, yeah, people who like, whose taste I respected, people who liked good movies and good music and stuff like that, they started talking about like good anime. So I started watching some of them, and like the classic, the one anime that like everybody says is the best, is called Cowboy Bebop. And I've talked to a few Japanese people about Cowboy Bebop. Apparently it's not really popular in Japan at all. It never really was. But it was on American TV. It was on that Toonami channel, like, you know, after dinner time, maybe 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so a lot of people in America watched it. And it's about like these, it's called Cowboy Bebop. It's not really cowboys. It's like, it's in space and they're like bounty hunters. So they try to get bad guys. But it's really cool. The like main character is really cool. The music is really good. And the story is really interesting and like emotional. But it's kind of weird that this is considered like a classic, maybe the best anime for like most Western people would often say that. But in Japan, it's like not really known very well. So I don't know. If you're listening to this and you like anime, I really recommend Cowboy Bebop. One of my favorites ever. Some other stuff I watched during those college days. I tried to watch a lot of like the canon. What the canon means, CANON, not NNON, which is, you know, like the big gun. Just CANON is like the classics, I guess, is maybe close to the right word. It's like the list of stuff you should watch or read to like understand what's important in that category of entertainment or culture. So like, yeah, people often talk about the canon in literature, which is, you know, all the, you know, the classic literature like Shakespeare and Charles Dickens and stuff like that would be like the canon of English literature. So anyway, the canon of anime, these are like the classics, the best ones. Cowboy Bebop is up there in America, and then also like Berserk, or I think it's Berserku, right, in Japanese. And that's like a fantasy one, of course. I think probably most people listening have heard of it. It's like dark fantasy. And then I liked some kind of science fiction ones that were considered classic. Like, of course, Evangelion is huge. It's really popular and I think really good, although quite difficult to understand with all the like biblical, the connections to the Bible and Christianity and stuff. And Ghost in the Shell, which is the English name. I looked up the Japanese name for this one. Koukaku Kidotai, I think, is what it is. Which is like, it's like a kind of half robot police officer lady. And they're dealing with like AI, even though this anime was made in like the 90s or early 2000s, there's like AI stuff in it, which is kind of interesting. And then the other, what else? Yeah, Legend of the Galactic Heroes was kind of like a Star Wars style anime. Ginga Eiyu Densetsu in Japanese. That one's like super old, and like, I remember the animation being like, there's not a lot of actual animation. It's kind of just like paintings, and they move the camera across the painting, something like that. And then Serial Experiments Lane is another kind of like AI one, kind of sci-fi computer one. It's quite weird, but it's considered a classic. And Fulikuli is another one with like, it's like there's like an alien, and the main character plays guitar and stuff, and it's the music in that one's really cool, and the art style is really interesting and kind of goofy. I don't know if that's the right word. It's weird, but it's interesting, and it has its very cool aesthetic and very interesting like tone in the way that the characters move and talk to each other. One of my favorites, Fulikuli. With good music too. Is that The Pillows, I think, is the band that did the music for Fulikuli. I could be wrong there. Yeah. So that's kind of the stuff that I watched or was told to watch in college. I was not the biggest anime fan, so I would trust the people that were. How can I say this? I would trust the people whose taste on other things, like movies and things like that, I trusted. Then I would trust their anime recommendations. If they were the kind of person that didn't really watch movies, but they just watched anime, then I wouldn't so much trust what they had to say about anime, if that makes sense. So yeah, I wanted to talk about anime this time, just because I've been thinking about it a little bit recently. Some of my students, my elementary school students, have talked about anime, and like I think they were talking about Beyblade, which maybe is like there's a new Beyblade series on TV, but it reminded me of when I watched it as a kid, and it made me think like, yeah, I haven't really watched anime in a long, long time, so if anybody has any recommendations of good anime series, I'd like to hear them. No promises that I'll watch it, because like I said, I don't really watch it anymore, but I'd like to see what other people are interested in, what people think are good, and maybe I'll try watching. Yeah, thanks for listening, and see you at the events next week. Bye.